Hey, what's up everyone? It's Jordan. Welcome to a Pianote practice along at a special time, 2 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on this lovely Wednesday afternoon. And we have a lovely lesson topic to talk about here. We're talking a little bit, we're doing like a conceptual lesson. We're going into the world of making kind of a story along with your practice. Because one of the things that sucks about practicing, let's face it, is it can be really boring, it can be really outside of musical context, and it can just be really dull just to kind of run through your scales. So I'm going to show you how I how I like to mentally get myself in a practice mindset and kind of fool my brain into just sitting down and working on stuff that I regularly wouldn't want to be working on. So obviously, before I really dive into this lesson, it obviously is super important, just as a disclaimer, to practice all your boring scales like that. Make sure that all of your major and minor scales that you're keeping up on those as you're practicing, and your triads as well. And that way. Yeah, that's just keeping your tools sharp. So, provided you're doing all of that, and you're still looking for some extra motivation to practice, we're going to start off with a bit more of an advanced little practice technique here. If you want to dumb this down, I'll show you how to do that in just a second here. But what we're going to do is we're going to go up the whole piano with this chord here, and we're moving chromatically, so we're just shifting our whole hands up, just one key to the right. So we're building major 7th chords. And we're just going to walk up, and this is one of my favorite chords to practice with. I just find it really inspiring, and I find it kind of gives me a lot of ideas. And as you're practicing your hand movements just going up the piano, I'm just playing my roots in the bass, and I'm playing my major 7th in the right. So all a major 7 chord is, if you're super new, is a major triad. I'm in A here, A major. So that's A, C sharp, and E. And then I put the 7th note of the scale on top. So I put G sharp on top. And I'm just chromatically walking up. And yeah, you're practicing your keyboard familiarity and your hand and muscle movements, just like a regular practice. But as you're moving up, you can also be thinking, like, what does this sound give you in your mind? What kind of images does this begin to elicit in your brain? You're practicing your imagination muscles as well as your physical hand muscles. So I'm going to go back down, and we're going to, just to make sure our timing is nice and consistent, we're going to set this bad boy down to 60 BPM. Let's see how that sounds. 2, 3, 4. All right, let's go down even further. Let's go down to 50. 2, 3, 4. And we're going to try quarter notes. If it's too fast, you can bump it down to half notes. You could turn your metronome down. Make sure that you're going at a pace that's nice and comfortable for you. And we're just going to be moving up chromatically with major 7 chords. And then we're going to show a different way to go back down. So 1, 2, 3, here we go. Starting on C. And then just gradually move up. We're just going to go up the whole piano like this. And as you're practicing it, feel that tension kind of start to build, because that's what ascending chromatic movements do. Like a big inflating balloon, or a bird flying higher and higher, or it can be whatever you want. It can be a bear on a unicycle if you want it to. Okay, so once we get to the very top of the keyboard, we're going to take a moment We're almost there. It's getting so high and brittle, and then boom, we're at the top of the piano. We've hit the highest major 7 chord that we can, which is a C sharp major 7. And now we're going to do something that now we're going to go back down, but we're going to go back down as diminished chords. So we're going to switch. Rather than playing a C sharp major 7 chord, which consists of the notes C sharp, F, G sharp, and C, we're going to shift just a little bit, and we're going to go and play this chord. So just look at it visually here. It's a D sharp, an F sharp, an A, and a C. So that's a diminished chord. And we're going to go down now with this little kind of creepy tiptoe mouse sound, starting from our very top chord. So all I'm doing here, and again, my left hand, I'm just going to keep it nice and simple. I'm just going to play the bottom note of the chord. So we're moving down chromatically with this shape. If you want to look at it as intervals, this is all minor thirds stacked up. So that's a minor third, that's a minor third, and that's a minor third. So we're going to go down like that, and then we're going to go back up as major 7 chords, and then back down. And yeah, so let's try that. 2, 3, here we go. Make sure that you're playing each note at the same time as the other ones. Starting to get pretty muddy down here, but just power on through. Beautiful. So the reason why I wanted you to go up and down in those 2 weird chords is because they sound, your major 7 chords sound really airy and open as you move up the piano. Sounds like some kind of Legend of Zelda stuff or something. And then when you move back down as diminished chords, that has a totally different kind of vibe. You know, moving down is kind of this dissonant kind of villainous sounding chord, but if you kind of slinky it down, it sounds like this leaf or something falling through the sky. And then you want to float that leaf back up with your major 7 chords. And back down with your diminished chords. All right, so that's just kind of a really weird example of using 2 weird chords that might not have a lot of, they might not always make a lot of sense of why you're practicing a chord like a diminished chord, because outside of context, it doesn't really sound, it's not pleasing, just hammer away on them. But always trying to give yourself some kind of emotional connection to what you're playing, no matter how dry it is or no matter how weird it is, will go a long way to helping you out. So let's simplify things just a little bit. We're going to get away from these weird 4-note chords, and we're going to go back to our simple C major. And here's another exercise you can use to try to make your playing a bit more storyteller-esque as you're practicing just simple stuff. So what we're going to do is we're just going to leave ourselves some nice open fifths in the left hand, C and G. And we're going to play this shape in the right hand. We're going to play 1, 2, 3, 5. And we're just in root position, so again, our hands are set up the same way. If we want to just pulse that out, we can do that. Just open fifths, C and G. And you don't need to use my melody exactly. You don't need to use the rhythm. You can change it. If you want to just keep it really simple, as just quarter notes, totally rhythmically in line with the left hand. C, D, E, and G. You're more than welcome to do that. And this sounds just lovely. It sounds like a nice major melody. But if you want to add a little bit of color to it, let's take this same shape and let's move it down to A. So our left hand's just going to go down to play A and E, and our right hand's going to go down to play that same movement, but this time starting on A. So we're going to do this one melody one more time. 2, 3, 4. And now we're going to go down to A. Here we go. Okay, so now we're in the minor world. And we're still focusing on good technique as we're practicing. We're still keeping our fingers rounded. But because we've contrasted two separate chords, we kind of have something that's a little more musically interesting to listen to. Okay, so go back up to C. Now down to A. And now let's go down to F. Again, same shape. And now let's go to G. And now back to C. Chords that we just played there. A minor here. Those 4 chords are super important in music theory. To G. And back to C. Once you get comfortable, you can start changing the rhythms a bit. Now I'm playing 8th notes in the left hand. Just those open fifths. Once you realize that all we're doing is we're just playing white keys. You can start to experiment with some of the other notes. So once you get a sense of what your basic chord progression is, and once you've sort of laid out what it is that you want to be practicing, and you've kind of given yourself a right-hand thing to do and a left-hand thing to do, you can use that as your jump-off point to make some cool musical ideas. So in the case of that little exercise there, we were using the oldest chords in the book for making pop songs. We were using our 1 chord, our minor 6 chord, we were using our 4 chord, and our 5 chord. And that is everything. Everything is written in that. You know, those chords, every single piece of music that you, maybe not quite literally every single piece of music, but almost, with just a few exceptions, they're using those kind of chords. And you can always, you know, gussy things up just like that. Once you learn what, not only just what the notes are being used to play as though you're reading a piece of sheet music, but just sort of what, again, think of yourself as an artist with one of those painting palettes with little colors, and you had 4 colors to work with there. You had a C major chord color, you had an A minor chord color, an F chord color, and a G chord color. And you can swirl those around, you can mix and match them. You have a blank canvas in front of you if you're practicing in this fashion where you don't have any sheet music, but you're aware of what it is that you are working with. And you can start to explore the potential of what you can do. So yeah. I forgot to mention at the start of this lesson that we are accepting questions. So if anyone has questions, please send them in, and I'll answer them on stream. You can send them in just with the Ask a Question button. Let's see what we got here. We got a question here from Lawrence Ellen. Hey, Lawrence. He says, what exercises would you recommend for hand independence? I've been playing for 1.5 years and still have difficulties, i.e. my left hand starts copying the tempo and the rhythm that my right hand is making. So there's 2 kinds of issues that I think many players will encounter when it comes to hand independence. One is just getting your hands separated so that they're playing different notes you know, in each hand. But then the other thing that you're having troubles with, Lawrence, is the rhythm of stuff. And luckily, the rhythmic element is something that you can practice and really build your skill set on regardless of whether or not you're at the piano. Because that really, the basic function that you're trying to build here is just, you know, you can just literally be just smacking your legs and setting yourself different rhythm variations to work with. And at a certain point, you can move that to the piano. So that's just this, but taking your hands, making them little chord claws, and putting them on the piano and playing a chord progression just like what we were doing in that exercise. So that's a mentality thing to always keep in mind when you're working with rhythm in hand independence. One other thing that I can say really helps out is obviously practicing hands separate, and I'm sure you've heard that before. And it always sucks to do because it feels like you're, you know, taking baby steps, just really crawling away. But the reason why it's worth it is because you want at least to have one hand that you're so comfortable with that it becomes your metronome. Notice how when I was practicing that little chord movement lesson at the beginning of this here, and I was just doing this, my left hand here has reached a point where I can talk to you and I don't need to be thinking about what it's doing because I was just, again, it's a motor function. I'm not thinking C and G and C and G. I'm just setting my hand here and kind of letting it do its thing. So until you get your hand, until you get your one hand that you're working with solid to the point where you can just kind of space out and trust that it's always going to be in time with the click and playing the right notes, then just leave. Don't worry about practicing both hands together because you want to have that level of reliability with your one hand that you can then base your rhythmic movements off of. So I hope that helps out. If you do have any more questions, just write in and I can maybe give you another shot here. Okay, so let's move on to another little example of how we can make some more story kind of stuff as we're practicing. So we did some kind of chordal stuff earlier on. We were kind of moving as though we were writing a little piece of music and making a small little chord progression. So now we're going to practice just a little bit of scales because we need those too, and we're going to take, this is D minor. So we're going to have D minor be our right hand scale. And we're just going to do eighth notes in the left hand. So I'm just playing a straight D minor triad. And we're just repeating an ascending D minor scale in one octave. And once we get that nice and solid and locked in, we're going to change just one note in the left hand. We're going to change our top note from an A to a B flat. And we're going to do that right now. Now we're going to go back to D minor right now. Now let's bump that up to B flat again. Back to D minor. Now let's try this same scale in the right hand, but we're going to take this D minor chord and make it an F chord. The way we're going to do that is take our pinky and move it down to one white key to the left. We're going to do that right at the end of this scale. Let's move up to that B flat chord. So that is going to be keeping the F note that we have with our finger 2, but moving our pinky back up to D and our thumb up to B flat. So at the end of this scale, we're going to do that. Here we go. Now at the end of this scale, we're going to go back to D. And once we start to get comfortable with all this movement, we can start to experiment with, get away a little bit from just this scale. black key that we got to worry about is that B flat. Everything else is fair game. And we don't have to stay in these inversions in our left hand. We can maybe play octaves. So let's see what that sounds like. Add your fifths in if you want to flesh things out even more. You can just play broken chords in the right hand. So just sticking with the notes of the triad. A C major chord. Now let's go back to the start. Right. Just quarter notes in your right hand. So it can be as easy as that. Obviously, if you're just starting out, you might not want to drift from the backyard too much. But I'm never going to say that you shouldn't explore as much as your heart is contented to do. As long as you just keep remembering, when you sit down at the piano, try to just bear in mind, like, set some goals at the start of your practice session. And if they're as simple and locked in and concrete as I want to practice my major scales and get that nice and fluid, and here's the 3 major scales that I want to practice, that's great. Hold yourself to that. If you want to just familiarize yourself to a deeper degree with a key signature or a chord progression, that's great as well. Give yourself some boundaries in which to do that. If like we were just practicing in the key of D minor there, and we had a couple set chords that we were working with, and we had sort of a set style of movement that we were working on in the right hand, which was scale movement. And eventually we drifted into kind of like rhythmic, just kind of noodling around and all that, and that's really fun to do. But treat that as your kind of your bonus round, where you're kind of jumping off and just experimenting with what are some of just the weird shapes you can make, and how can you stay, how creative can you get within just one key signature. So yeah, that's all I've got for this lesson here. So I'm going to just do a little more improvising out on D minor. And if anyone has any questions or wants to post their practice tips on this kind of mentality in the Pianote forums, please feel free to do so. We have a ton of awesome stuff happening there. And yeah, thanks so much for watching.